To find the derivative of this problem, of this function here, you have to notice that first, this is a composite function. When you plug in x, first you find what's 4x to the 10th and what's the secant of 8x. Then, right, you take the fifth root of the result. So this is the fifth root of u, where u is 4x to the 10th plus secant 8x. So that, to solve this question, we're going to use the chain rule. One more useful fact to note is that the fifth root of a function of a number is the same as raising that number to the 1/5 power, so that's what we'll use. So the chain rule will then say that dy dx, or y prime, is 1/5 u to the 1/5 minus 1, so that's the power rule, times u prime, or du dx, which is the chain rule. So that's 1/5 4x to the 10th plus secant 8x to the 4/5, to the negative 4/5, because 1/5 minus 1, times u prime, which is 4x to the 10th plus secant 8x prime. Okay. So on this one, because this has a negative exponent, I'll bring it down to the bottom of the fraction and write it as the 5 stays because it was already there. So it will now be 4x to the 10th plus secant 8x to the 4/5. So the power, the exponent changes sign because I'm flipping from the top to the fraction to the bottom of the fraction. And then on this one, I have to derive. So the first term is easy. That is the power rule. So the 10 comes down, making it a 40x to the 9th. Subtract 1 from the 10. Plus, and this one is the slightly more difficult part, I have to look at deriving d dx of secant 8x. So that will be d dx of secant u, where u is 8x. So that's the chain rule again. When I plug in an x value, I first multiply by 8, and then I find the secant of that. So that's a composition of functions which requires the chain rule. So I'll do, what's the derivative of secant u with respect to u times du dx. That is the chain rule, okay? And then the result will be, what's the derivative of secant? Secant derived equals secant times tangent times du dx. U was 8x, so that equals 8. So then this is 8 secant, remember what u was to plug it back in, secant 8x tangent 8x. So that is what goes in here. Careful with your parentheses placement here. The reader could be confused if you don't put parentheses. So I think I could write this as multiplying this whole thing on the top of the fraction, 40x to the 9th plus 8 secant 8x tangent 8x divided by 5 4x to the 10th, that's correct, plus secant 8x to the 4/5. You could possibly factor more things out here. For example, there's an 8 that could be factored out from the top, but I'm not sure if you could cancel this 8 with anything, so I don't think it's worth the trouble. I will leave my answer as such.